Hey, Viking fans, this is Keith Millard, and you are listening to the One Bar and Lupicus Show. Go Vikes!
All right, welcome back to the One Bar and Lupicus Show. I'm One Bar, and it is that time of the year. It is SKOL'ing with the Enemy. We're going to pick the brains of our enemy. And week one, we got the Bengals, so we got a special treat here. We got Ace Boogie from New Stripe Cities podcast YouTube channel, one of the biggest Bengal ones out there. Check them out. I always say that I check them out beforehand. I'm not blowing smoke up your ass. I actually check these guys out quite a bit just so I'm prepared and I am ready to go. So Ace Boogie in the house. Thanks for joining the show. I appreciate you hopping on.
Yeah, man, I'm glad to be here. Definitely looking forward to our matchup and answering some questions.
Absolutely. So I'm ripping the Band-Aid right off the get-go. Expectations for the Bengals. I mean, it's been a while since they've had a little bit of a winning season. Or is it starting to curve up? Are Bengals fans getting excited, or is it just kind of status quo?
It definitely has been, a rough past, 4 or 5 years now, especially coming from a, season and era that started in 2011 where we just had so much success. And, we kind of got knocked off for a couple of years. And honestly, I think now this season, there is some excitement. I think, there was some excitement that kind of started last year when we got Joe Burrow, because we were waiting for some new energy to be injected into this Bengals team. And, to get a guy like Joe Burrow following the crazy story that he had at LSU and bringing him into the Bengals fold, and him originally starting at Ohio State, being from Ohio, it was just a slam dunk and we were excited. But the thing is, we also had a new coaching staff, so that kind of made people somewhat excited. And then, we had 3 rough years back to back to back. Joe Burrow gets hurt. And, a lot of people were looking at it and were like, okay, we moved on from Andy Dalton. We got rid of Marvin Lewis, but this seems to be kind of the same old issues with this Bengals team. And so I think this offseason, we kind of felt like things have changed. It started with the new jerseys. I know how crazy that sounds, but Bengals haven't had new jerseys since the Carson Palmer era started. And so one of the things I think just visually from that aspect, from ownership, especially Elizabeth Blackburn, who is Mike Brown's granddaughter, has really just taken the horns at changing what the opinions and what the image of the Bengals really are to the fan base, and also within the media as well. And she's done a number of things outside of the new jerseys. They did a Ring of Honor. These were things that Bengals fans have been asking about for a while, and they've actually done those things. And so with that, there comes a lot of excitement. And then you see them do things like they did in the draft with bringing a guy like Jamar Chase in, bringing back an offensive line coach in Frank Pollock, whom they never should have gotten rid of, and doing some things out here in free agency that they haven't typically done in years past. And so I do feel like there is a definite renewed sense of energy. And, there's been some up and downs, but I think that it's definitely trending up, especially with this week 1 matchup. The Bengals will be able to see exactly where they really stand. We've seen the offseason moves, we've seen the new jerseys, but at the end of the day, Zach Taylor and the staff have to also prove that now that they have their players in that were transitioned out from the Marvin Lewis era, that they're going to be ready to play and are going to be a different team.
Well, and you say we're going to see what happens week 1. Vikings fans are thinking the exact same thing. A very, very different team is going to be coming on the field, especially on the defensive side of the ball. So you and I, we're in the same boat here. And really, I feel like the Bengals and Vikings kind of have a shared soul here when it comes to not being able to develop interior offensive linemen. You recently got rid of Michael Jordan. You got rid of Billy Price. We've had serious issues with our guard position. So I feel we have a little shared pain, I'll say.
Definitely. I would definitely agree with you on that. The Bengals, it seems like, to be honest with you, since about 2015, 2016, honestly, have been trying to rebuild this line. They've gone through different coaching staff. So they, like you said, you talked about Billy Price. He was a carryover from the Marvin Lewis era. And it essentially has been pretty much garbage for the last, 3 or 4 seasons. But one thing that I will say is in that time, in that span, There was a man that took some of that garbage and made something out of it, and that was Frank Pollock in 2018. Although he was with the Marvin Lewis staff, what ended up happening was he ended up getting the best out of that unit, ended up bringing in Cordy Glenn, ended up doing some things. He actually drafted Billy Price. And then the weird part was they moved on from him. So Zach Taylor didn't agree to bring him on the staff, and a lot of Bengals fans were upset. Joe Mixon himself was upset. He was like, how are we going to let one of the best offensive line coaches leave? And it was because Zach wanted to bring in his guy and Jim Turner. And that proved to be a horrible mistake because once Jim Turner came in, his style just didn't mesh with the players that we had. And his technique that he taught was not the best. And because of that personal relationship, Zach kept him an additional year. And it really hurt this team. Bobby Hart was re-signed. There were decisions that were made. Guys were played out of position and things of that nature that really affected this offensive line. And so one of the things that the Bengals have tried to do to kind of debunk that issue is they drafted Jonah Williams. Now they're bringing Frank Pollock in, and they felt like Frank Pollock would be able to get the absolute best from this team. They went and got your boy Riley Reif to solidify that right tackle position because Bobby Hart was Bobby Hart's like been on 3 or 4 teams since the Bengals have cut him. That should tell you all you need to know about Bobby Hart. But as you also talked about, the guard position obviously was an issue for us last year. We ended up having to bring in Quentin Spain, who somewhat solidified it, but Michael Jordan obviously was responsible for Joe Burrow getting hit. And it wasn't just him, the guard position in general was just horrible last year. You had Xavier Su'a-Filo go down, and they just didn't have guys there that were able to step in and play. And this season, Frank Pollock has really put his touch on it. He ended up drafting a kid in Jackson Carman in the 2nd round to try to be the heir apparent at the right guard position. He hasn't quite won that role because they do say he did come in kind of out of shape, and he wants him to actually earn that role. So as of now, he's going with the veterans. We've got Xavier Su'a-Filo back. We've got Quentin Spain. He's also got another kid by the name of Deontay Smith, and he's just really putting his fix on this offensive line. He's taking guys that shouldn't have been guards and making them tackles. And a lot of Bengals fans have a lot of trust in him because we've seen what he did with guys like Cedric Ogbuehi and how bad that line was when he took it over in 2018. That was another team the prior season that gave up like 40 or 50 sacks. And so the Bengals are going all in on Frank Pollock. And after watching this preseason, I'm not going to lie, they look completely different. The guys sound a lot more confident. He's definitely using way better technique than Jim Turner was using last year. So we just have to hope that it holds up. But I think Bengals fans do feel confident, even though we passed on Panay, that the offensive line and what Frank Pollock has done has made this unit definitely upgrade.
Yeah, I can confirm. I've seen a couple of your shows, and you have not been a fan of previous offensive line regimes. So once again, we're joined with Ace Boogie from New Stripe City's YouTube channel. Check them out, and they definitely legit some kick-ass interviews as well with some pretty damn good Bengals players and past players. So one in particular, Jeff Blake, who will always have a special place in my heart, as I loved watching him chuck it to Darnay Scott and Carl Pickens back in the day. Nothing better. So let's talk what it all I mean, your season, feel free to tell me I'm a complete idiot, but it completely rides on Joe Burrow as far as if he's back healthy. Is there are you scared? Are you going to be scared the first couple of weeks, the first couple times he gets hit back there? Or are you completely confident that Joe Burrow is back and he is ready to ball?
I'm of the sense that Joe Burrow is a robot, man. This guy is special. I mean, just some of the stuff that he was able to do last year was just insane. Like, this team was nowhere near as talented as it is now. And that's not saying much. I'm not saying they're one of the top talented teams in the league, but compared to what he had last year, it's kind of a surprise that we were in some of the games with Joe Burrow. But I think he just has the it factor. Like, if it were anyone else, if this were Andy Dalton that went through the same injury, or even Carson Palmer, I don't think that they would have the mental fortitude to go through that process and come back. And I would just assume that they would just hit the ground running. But I do feel quite confident with Joe Burrow just because of his personality. And obviously things happen, and, I'm not a doctor or anything like that. We did have an NFL doctor on. He claimed that Joe Burrow's injury wasn't as major as it may have kind of seemed. But I do have the belief in Joe Burrow just because of how he's built, the person that he is, not being able to be on the field and watching the team last year, the first time that he was able to talk, as soon as he tore his knee, his first thing to his dad was, I had 200 yards on the Washington football team. I was going for 400. And that's just kind of the way that the guy is built. And so I think if there's anyone who can come in and, be successful after an injury like that, I think it's Joe Burrow. And I think it does all right on Joe Burrow. I think Bengals fans will be fooling themselves if you were to say we can be successful without Joe Burrow. It definitely rides on his shoulders. And we always feel like Joe Burrow is the X factor, right? Because quarterbacks in this league, no matter how good or how bad the team is, if the quarterback plays at a high level, he can be the X factor in a win or a loss. And so Joe Burrow is definitely going to be and play a pivotal role, I think, in the Bengals season upcoming. I'm not really worried about him getting hit too much. Obviously, I don't want to see him get hit 8 times or anything from what I saw last year. Obviously, I think if we saw him get hit like that from the Philadelphia game to some of the other games, we're going to be upset and we're going to demand that they do something, make a trade or something like that. That would be the only thing that would concern me. But I do believe that with Frank Pollock there, I don't think that he will be getting hit as much as he usually has been in the past last season. So I am somewhat concerned. Obviously, you never want to see your quarterback take hits, but I am confident in the offensive line, and I am confident that Joe Burrow will hit the ground running.
Well, I'm looking forward to a little Danielle Hunter against Riley Reef this Sunday. It's going to be a good one, but don't get me wrong. I love me some Riley Reef. I love that guy. I don't know how he's looked for the Bengals so far this offseason, but I was a big Riley Reef guy.
He's been pretty solid. I mean, to go from Bobby Hart to Riley Reef, like Riley Reef, oh my goodness. Bobby Hart probably makes a Riley Reef look like, I don't know, Tyron Smith or something like that. Like, it's a huge upgrade because Bobby Hart just, allowed so much pressure. And the one thing I'll say is I interviewed Quentin Spain yesterday, and he talked about Riley Reef and the example that he set in the locker room, just coming in to work early every single day, always being the first guy there, last guy to leave. And I think that that's definitely going to help the young offensive lineman out and definitely bring stability to the line.
Well, this will help you sleep at night better. If Joe Burrow was to go down, you have Jake Browning waiting on the practice squad to lead you guys to the promised land. Jake Browning is fantastic, and he's got you guys. That was really rude. You guys pretty much, I mean, you're going to cut him by what, Monday, Tuesday?
That's what I'm thinking. I'm like, that seems like a little bit of inside information, inside on the Vikings offense.
You're toying with my man Jake Browning's emotions here by signing him. So, all right, I don't want to live in the past. Let's just short and sweet. When it comes to the last draft, were you hoping offensive line? I mean, Jamar Chase is definitely a guy that is very tough to pass on, but just your quick thoughts on that.
Yeah, I mean, originally everybody watching this that watches my channel, we had a big civil war, and I was on Team Panay. I'm not gonna lie, like Team Sewell was who I wanted to go with because at the time I just couldn't trust the product that the Bengals had put out in terms of the offensive line. I couldn't trust whatever draft moves that they were going to make, because if you didn't pick an offensive lineman in the first round, I don't know if I trust who they're going to pick in the second round if they do take Chase. So it never was anything against Chase. It was more so PTSD from watching Burrow just take a beating all last season and really just not taking into account the fact that Jim Turner was, a horrible offensive line coach. I don't even think he's probably even employed right now at the college or NFL level. So initially I was definitely Team Sewell, but seeing how things shaped out when they went out and got Riley Reef, I think that definitely stabilized the line. I think them bringing in Pollock definitely opened the door. And then when I saw that Chase was in reach, and the year prior, a lot of Bengals fans were saying, hey, next year let's go and get Chase. So I kind of figured that it was a unique situation. Also, those guys coming from the same offense, the same school, already having chemistry. And then Zach Taylor kind of implementing some of those offensive plays from LSU in our offense. It kind of made sense. So, yes, I was going for Sewell because at the time I just felt like, he would be the guy that could stabilize this offensive line. And I was kind of proved wrong, at least so far in the preseason. Now we'll have to see in the regular season. But the other thing is that Sewell's been struggling. So there's a lot of people that are following Sewell now And, he's struggling in Detroit, which I kind of figured would happen if you made him play right tackle. I personally wanted him to play left tackle and probably would have moved Jonah Williams over to the right because I feel like he would have been able to adjust to it better. But so far, it's actually looking like the Bengals may have done the right thing. If they do get Chase to be more consistent in the offense, it definitely can be explosive. And I think that it will actually, in a weird way, help out Joe Burrow and the rest of this offense with them having Tyler Boyd, Jamar Chase, and T. Higgins. Teams like the Ravens that blitzed us heavily last year won't be able to do that. And if the offensive line does stick up, and we don't need them to be elite, right? We just need them to just be middle of the pack. I'll take 20th in the league at this point. And, if they can do that, then I think that it'll be looked at as the right decision. But I was on Team Sewell. But, when a person puts on that jersey at the draft, he's a Bengal to me, and I just become on the team of that player. So I'm Team Chase currently.
Yeah, once the pick's in, it's over. You're instantly in love with the guy. And a good example of that is when the Vikings took Trey Waynes, who, congratulations, is appearing to have a huge impact for the Bengals.
Right.
So let's just talk on Chase quick. Clearly, he's not had the most fantastic preseason. Any issues? Is this guy going to ball out?
So I personally think it's almost kind of getting annoying at this point that they've made it as big of an issue as it is. And I honestly think that it's a lot of PTSD from John Ross. John Ross was a guy that they picked in the top 10. They expected him to just come in and just be the heir apparent to AJ Green. And he never really lived up to expectations. So I think a lot of that PTSD from the fan base has kind of carried over. Now, that's not to say he hasn't had drop issues, but we're talking about a guy who hasn't played meaningful football since 2020, right? And so he's nearly 2 years removed from playing football. And I think that he's just going to have to work the kinks out. I think some people just assumed, this guy is a top 5 receiver. We're taking him because a lot of us are used to when we took AJ Green, and it was a completely different situation, right? You talk about AJ Green and Julio Jones. Those guys were generational coming out in that draft. They actually ended up playing the season prior. So there wasn't any kind of lag between seasons. And I think that that's what it is. And, he's trying to learn an NFL offense. He's trying to learn how to adjust to the NFL speed. And he's also trying to learn a playbook and just get out of his own head. So I honestly think that it's somewhat mental. And it's crazy because the first game that he was in, he made a screen pass, no problem, right? They took him out of the game. There wasn't an issue. It wasn't until that second game against the Washington football team where he just had the drops where it started to become a thing. And I think, honestly, one of them, I think, was just a business decision. He just didn't want to get clocked by Landon Collins in the preseason. But then once you drop that first one and then that second one, it's in your head. And I think that that's been a thing. He's had up and down practices after that. Like, he came back and was dropping passes like the next day. And then after that, he was catching everything, and he stayed behind and worked on it and worked on his craft. And that's the one thing I'll say about Chase is that he's a hard worker. So if there's something that he's doing that is an issue, then he will work at it. And as you guys know, with Justin Jefferson, they talked a lot to some of the LSU receiver coaches. And I know for a fact in the offseason, these guys had the summer of 10,000 catches. So I know that he's a guy that can continue to work on that. And I don't think, honestly, I think everybody is expecting him to have a bunch of drops in the opener, but I don't think it's going to be that. I think he's a guy that wants to kind of quiet the local media and the people doubting him and things of that nature. But if he does have drops, to me, it's just going to happen. Rookies have growing pains. Everybody can't be Justin Jefferson. That's why I was telling a lot of Bengals fans, don't expect Justin Jefferson because this guy broke the rookie record in terms of receiving yards. But I do think Chase will be fine. And I think I would still – I wouldn't put the radar down on him expecting that he's just going to have drops in the first game is what I would say. I would just temper expectations and probably expect him to fall in between the guy that they picked at number 5 that everybody hyped and the guy that has struggled with drops. I think he'll land somewhere in between that.
Well, the Bengals, whether he's dropping them or not, they got plenty of receivers out there that scared the shit out of me. So the Bengals are doing pretty good when it comes to the wide receiver position. What's the looking at the Bengals? Maybe I just talked about it, but what is their number one strength in 2021?
Man, that's a good question. I probably would say receiver, to be honest with you, because they're just stacked at that position. Even after those three guys. You also still have Auden Tate, who is more than capable as well. So I would definitely probably say receiver. I would probably say quarterback is the strength of this team, and that's solely talking about Joe Burrow after receiver. And then you might throw in running back. It's kind of sneaky good. I would say, obviously, Joe Mixon is going to be a guy that's really going to be able to put it together back with Frank Pollock. The last time Frank Pollock was here was when Joe Mixon led the AFC in rushing. So he's going to be back, and he's definitely going to be a factor. But the one guy that may be flying under the radar right now is our backup running back right now. And it's a rookie that we drafted out of the University of Michigan, and he didn't really get to play that frequently there. But he's going to be replacing Giovanni Bernard, and he's going to be, I think, a major factor this year. And he's currently flying under the radar. So I would probably give it to the running backs after that in terms of who are the strengths of the team. So wide receiver on offense, I would probably say, then running back. And then you got wide receiver, quarterback, and then running back. And then as far as defense, I'd probably say the secondary, I probably would say, are the strengths. The two safeties are already probably the strongest parts. And then you have the corners but it's kind of up in the air because Trey Waynes isn't there. So it just depends on how you look at it. But those are, I would probably say, the strengths of the team.
Kind of putting a damper on my thoughts. I was looking at the secondary thinking that might be a spot the Vikings could take advantage of. So
I do think you will be able to take advantage of the backup for Trey Waynes right now. Eli Apple, I haven't even seen anything from Eli Apple. I will say Cheeto, who we brought in free agency, has looked spectacular all of training camp. And Mike Hilton, I'm interested to see how they're going to use him, because you can use him as a blitzer. And I think that he's going to be an upgrade for them in the nickel. But as you said, on the outside, Eli Apple is definitely going to be a liability. Then you got Jesse Bates, and then you got Von Bell. So I think that you're solid there. They'll probably try to rotate some guys in. Darius Phillips, he's pretty solid. I'm actually hoping to see more of him than Eli Apple. Because I actually believe in his ball skills way more than Eli Apple's. But Eli Apple definitely will be a liability, especially if he's on either Adam Thielen or Justin Jefferson. That completely scares me. It definitely worries me, because he could be the factor in that secondary that just gets it all blown up.
Well, Jesse Bates, he's the real deal. He's fantastic. So what's the shit show on your team? Where is somewhere the Vikings could absolutely take advantage of that keeps you up at night sweating?
I definitely think Eli Apple. I think he's on the list. I would probably also say the linebackers. I'm not going to say that they're bad, but there are some big question marks there. I'm not sure exactly how far along Logan Wilson is. I do like him as a player, but there's a lot of young guys that aren't really proven there. And in years past, we've just had tight ends and just anybody over the middle kind of gash us there. They've also let up a lot of rushing yards. I'm an old friend of Dalvin Cook. I actually lived in Tallahassee, so I watched him at FSU. I actually wanted the Bengals to draft Dalvin Cook for what it's worth. So I know what that guy is capable of. So that's one of my worries. And then obviously with you guys having Justin Jefferson as well as Adam Thielen, I'm worried about Eli Apple. And if there's another position, I think those are the only ones that scare me. You do have Danielle Hunter, so obviously from the edge, we're worried about that as well. But I feel more comfortable, not anything against Danielle Hunter, because he's one of the best in the NFL. But the fact that we finally have Riley Reif there and Jonah Williams, I can actually sleep at night with that versus it being Bobby Hart. I would just be ready for that to just get demolished in terms of that. So those are the positions that I would probably say I'm worried about coming into this game.
I'm going to go on a hunch and say you do not buy a Bobby Hart jersey. You do not seem to be a very big fan of Bobby Hart.
Not whatsoever. I'm not the biggest Bobby Hart hater. I gave him his props when he had some decent showings, but man, when you give a guy an extension after giving up 10 sacks, that can mess with the fan base.
All right. Once again, joined with New Stripe City, Ace Boogie. Check him out. Biggest Bengals YouTube channel alter. Well, the best one I've seen for sure. Let's wrap this up. Just as far as going into Sunday, I mean, honestly, from a Vikings perspective, I look at this as a game as we got to go in and win this week one. This is a game that we should win. This is a game that I feel that we will win. That said, anytime I think that, it doesn't happen. So what's your take from the Bengals side of things? Would this be an upset if you guys took it out? Is confidence high in Cincinnati, thinking that they're going to take the Vikings out? What are you thinking?
I think it's definitely an upset. Bengals fans, we have a special place in our heart for Mike Zimmer. A lot of us wanted Mike Zimmer to take over for Marvin Lewis, to replace Marvin Lewis. There's still Bengals fans wondering, hey, are the Vikings going to let Zimmer go so we can get him back? So we have a tremendous amount of respect for him because we know what he's able to get out of a defense, right? And so we know how hard it's going to be for Joe Burrow to go against a Mike Zimmer-led defense. So that's a tall order. Then you also have Joe Burrow coming off this knee injury, and he's only had 3 snaps in the preseason. So he hasn't really had a chance to really knock that rust off. I think that there's some optimism, but I think for me personally, I'm trying to be realistic here and look at the Vikings. They're a great team. Kirk Cousins, I think, is an underrated quarterback. They've got a great defensive mind over there in Zimmer that's going to make it tough for the Bengals. And for me, I actually see us probably losing this game. But what I want to see from the Bengals is, can they make this a close game? Is it going to look like these teams are close? If they can sneak one, of course, I'm with it. But I'm going into this season looking at this game, and I'm like, man, this is a big test early to let us know exactly where we're at. But I'm almost wishing that week 1 and week 2 were swapped, because the first week would be against the Bears and our old friend Andy Dalton, who I feel much more comfortable about than the Vikings. So me personally, I'm not super optimistic about this game. I think I'm just trying to be realistic and say, okay, this is a tall order for us to win week 1, but let's see where we're at week 1. But if they can sneak a win in, hey, I'm all for it.
Hey, watch your mouth. We Vikings need this, man. We need that win. Now it's going to be interesting. Vikings are a completely different team, like I said, especially on defense. It's going to be interesting. I'm really impartial going in this game. I'm a little more scared than I probably should be, but I do expect the Vikings to win. We will see. But once again, thanks for joining the show. We are now up to speed on everything Bengals. Hopefully you guys get Bobby Hart back some way, somehow before Sunday. But again, check out the links down below. We'll have links to all New Stripe City's info, and definitely Ace Boogie. Thanks again for joining the show. Greatly appreciated.
Appreciate it, bro. Thanks for having me.